standing by ready to lower it on essentially on chains if the mechanical device isn't working. So Peter, in a little while the ball will be up there. The folks are starting to gather downstairs here, and they're looking forward to the first glimpse of that Millennium Crystal Ball.
Jack, let me interrupt you because we're seeing something quite amazing here. This literally is a virtual orchestra being conducted in a virtual way electronically with laser beams. Watch the conductor. Of Baltimore's Peabody Institute is using two light-emitting wands which have infrared sensors, and he's pointing them in the direction and speed and with the nuance that he wants them to have. And as they move through space, newly invented software reads the information and triggers a whole range of orchestral sound. There it goes, this magnificent Waterford crystal ball. They've pulled the switch. They've lighted it up. If you look high above the old New York Times building at the southern end, right at 43rd Street, 42nd Street, and Times Square, this crystal ball, which has been synonymous with this place since 1906, makes its way into an early sky. The highest tech ball they've ever had. An elaborate hardware and software system descending into this square, which is in itself all about electronic hardware now selling products all over the world. It's 12 o'clock noon in London at Big Ben at the Houses of Parliament. There'll be quite a celebration there. We had a brief report that there'd been a power outage in in Auckland and in Wellington and New Zealand, but we're glad to hear that they have power back. Quite a far cry from the days in which they dropped an iron ball every day to mark the time. The ball has a tradition. No matter where it occurs, it's put up so people know that it is a certain time. It has its original traditions at sea. The Navy picked it up in the United States as well, and now it becomes synonymous not just in New York's Times Square, but in many other cities around the world where they drop something. Going to be a plum, I believe, in Atlanta. Or no, it's not going to be a peach in Atlanta. How could it be anything but a peach in Atlanta? On Peachtree Street. But for now, there you see the ball, which will come down 12 hours from now in New York Times Square. Lots of things to contend with today. From Y2K to crowds to the weather in some places, but one thing that everybody will be thrilled to contend with, and that is tradition. A little later on we'll talk about this quite extraordinary square where the New York Times first made its home almost a century ago, or a century ago actually, which time a lot of people in the city thought they were mad, and now New Yorkers will tell you that it is the absolute center of the universe. And certainly anybody who comes to this city from anywhere else in the world wants to be, at least for a moment or two, in Times Square. But this is a day for the universe. And so why not, as we begin our day, as we begin the time where Good Morning America normally is seen, Charlie Gibson is in London, Diane Sawyer will be here a little later to help us celebrate this day. But as we begin this day in the traditional broadcast time, why not an overture for the globe? to see it a couple of more times today because it's a very beautifully prepared thing, which really does give you a sense of what is happening in all the corners of the globe today. We've begun to celebrate the 21st century in the Pacific. The sun is coming up in Florida. Another horrible day in paradise, as they often say down here, and the ball has gone up in New York's Times Square. And we have a lot of very valuable colleagues waiting at their posts around the world, so we're just going to move around the world a little bit now and see what they have on offer. First to London, ABC's Charlie Gibson. Charlie.
Well, Peter, you saw the bonging of Big Ben, the bells of Big Ben bonging the 12 noon time, and that's the last time, at least with the first digit of 1, that we will hear that. And actually a fair group of people had gathered on Westminster Bridge in order to celebrate that modest occasion, and people are beginning to gather along the banks of the Thames. We're now 12 hours away from the celebration here, when the entire Thames River will be lit on fire, and as I said, the British modestly say they're going to have the biggest fireworks show in the history of the world.
What else is cooking, Charlie?
Well, Peter, one of the things that I think is worthy of mention is the fact that millions of people will be singing Auld Lang Syne when the midnight hour comes. And while that is a very American tradition, it is something that began here, as so many traditions do, in Great Britain.
It feels as if it's always been there. No matter what the year, no matter where the festivities, there is that song. But for the song's origins, you must go to the Green Hills of Western Scotland. That is the home of the poet Robert Burns, who was the first one to write down the lyrics to an old Scottish folk song more than 200 years ago.
He was gathering old songs, and he knew this song had never been actually written down before, and Burns had got the melody from an old man he heard singing.
He tidied up the words, added some verses of his own, and not content with the song's original melody, he found one more to his liking. Another well-known Scottish tune of the time. Burns' Auld Lang Syne grew in popularity, particularly after his death in 1796, and soon became the traditional Scottish song of parting.
Auld Lang Syne, which literally translated means for old time's sake. And we're going to gather again, meet up for Auld Lang Syne, old time's sake.
As Scots emigrated around the world in the last century, they took the song with them to places like Canada. There it was heard by the man who would make it a part of New Year's Eve.
And now, here is Mr. New Year's Eve himself, Guy Lombardo.
From the stage of the Grill Room at New York's Roosevelt Hotel, Lombardo and his Royal Canadians made Auld Lang Syne a New Year's Eve standard. They played it there for the first time in 1929 and continued for decades afterwards, making it their signature song. A tradition was born.
Happy New Year, everybody. A very happy New Year.
So, Peter, when the ball drops tonight and you have a little glass of the bubbly and you kiss your favorite person, a little thanks to Bobby Burns up in Scotland for bringing us Auld Lang Syne.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Look forward to talking to you many times throughout the day. 39 opportunities there are to celebrate the New Year's. If you like the 39 different time zones in the world, we're going to cross a lot of them. In a minute, we'll go to Barbara Walters. But first, just to tell you some of the news that has been made today. The big surprise when we all got underway this morning was that Boris Yeltsin in Moscow announced that he was going to resign as president and turn over the reins to his acting president, Vladimir Putin. President Clinton has already hailed Mr. Yeltsin's leadership and says that he looks forward to working with Mr. Putin. The so-called nuclear codes have been turned over by Mr. Yeltsin to Mr. Putin, who not very long ago, probably in his wildest dreams, could never have expected he was likely to be the next president of Russia. In Kandahar, in Afghanistan, 5 hijacked